That goes hard. And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, everybody out there in the internet? Gene Berardelli and Ross Galloway here with you. Ross, what you doing, man?
I'm exhausted, man. I just got back from the West Coast handling some business. You know what I mean?
Well, am I allowed to ask you about that business, or is that like some of that Black Ops stuff we used to do in the day?
Yeah, we'll talk about it after the show.
All right, we got people coming into the chat. How you doing, Coffee Grinder? We see you in there. We got a show. Basically, it's going to be one topic, I think, pal, because there's so much going on that West Coast in LA, and it's not just going to be us out there. We do have a guest waiting in the wings. That's a friend of ours, and well, let's bring him in.
So I want to thank you all for being here, and now who am I introducing next? Who's next?
John Lubecki, how you doing, pal?
Hey, I was waiting for Joe Biden to pop up.
Listen, we had to show who was next, right?
Oh,
What's going
exactly.
on, man? How are things?
They're fantastic. I'm actually in Baltimore right now, not down in D.C. Because there's a parade this weekend, and it was the congressional baseball game tonight, and I just kind of assumed there's going to be protests. So I came to spend some time with a friend up here in Baltimore, which is a little safer because we're out in the suburbs.
All right, very cool. Did you went to the baseball game? Can you tell us who won?
No, I didn't go to the game. I've been up here because I wanted to get out before everything went nuts.
Does anybody really care about the congressional baseball game anymore? I know it was a source of pride back in the day, but ever since that Scalise shooting, it feels like it's become, not that it couldn't have been already over politicized, but it feels like we just beat up on Democrats who don't know how to play sports. Right, Russ?
I was going to say, when was the last time the Democrats won? It's been quite a few years now.
You know what?
But here's okay. So one, and I hate this term, normies. No, it does not matter. For people who are on the Hill, staffers, lobbyists, activists, all the people in the political realm, it's a big deal. It's a huge networking event. You get to go, you root against people. And I'll tell you, the last time the Democrats won is when they elected athletes to office. Right now, Republicans have an edge on professional athletes and amateur athletes, but that hasn't always been the case. The Democrats, not that long ago, within 10 years, had a few like professional baseball players who were elected to office and would play.
Well, I'm trying to get an update right now. I see Republicans were winning as of the bottom of the fifth inning. They were up 6-2 for anybody who cares. And that's
and here's the funny part. Most people outside of D.C. don't actually know that there's more than just the congressional baseball game. There's also the congressional soccer game. They have all these different sports.
Soccer's not a sport.
Ross, when you're ready to kick them, let me know.
You mean football in the rest of the world?
Lubecki and Gene, just let me throw this out there. That intro had me crying, man. I did not expect that. That was freaking hilarious. I want an intro like that next time, Gene. That was funny.
I'll do my best. I thought that was pretty good. It was actually the first time we did it, and I snuck him into the screen under. It was pretty cool, if you ask me. So,
hey, Ross, what your intro needs to be is George C. Scott as Patton walking up in front of the flag.
That's a good idea.
Oh, I love it.
I like it. I see I got to sit back a little bit to get out of the logo, but you know what? I don't care. Who wants to look at me anyway? We're talking about what's been going on in the news the past 4 days. It's dominated the news cycle. All of the riots in L.A. I do want to set this up with a clip from today. This is Caroline Leavitt from the White House, which I believe is a good summary of the point of view from the president, conservatives. I think this is a pretty good summary of the past couple of days.
Transpire in Los Angeles, California in recent days is shameful. Left-wing radicals waving foreign flags viciously attacked ICE and Border Patrol agents as well as Los Angeles police officers. These criminals injured police, threw rocks at police cars and officers, burned vehicles, shut down freeways, and lobbed Molotov cocktails, all because the Trump administration was removing violent criminal illegal aliens from the city. These attacks were aimed not just at law enforcement, but at American culture and society itself. Rioters burned American flags, chanted "Death to ICE," and spray-painted anti-American slogans on buildings. But President Trump will never allow mob rule to prevail in America. The most basic duty of government is to preserve law and order, and this administration embraces that sacred responsibility.
I might as well stop it there because you're going to just keep going on and on and on, and that's for us to do. Ross, was a decent summary of what's been going on, or do you think it's not going far enough?
No, I think that, by the way, she's brilliant. I made this comment earlier today to someone. She's so well-versed and well-spoken on these issues. She knows exactly what the president is thinking or saying. A lot of people on TV, Gene, have been saying, well, a lot of Democrats, let me rewind. A lot of Democrats were saying these things were mostly peaceful, other than, a few cars getting burned, rocks getting thrown at police, and, a federal building almost being overrun before the National Guard got there. So how much not peaceful activity is acceptable to the Democrats? That's like the real question that I've been having over the last few days. How much violence is acceptable before it meets their mostly peaceful threshold to call them protesters, not rioters?
Realize that the radical left views Luigi Mangione as a protester. So to answer your question, because it is their side, anything is acceptable. I mean, let's be honest. Last summer, they were chanting "Globalize the Intifada." What does this look like? And some of the same organizations like PSL are behind both the campus protests and now the LA protests that have moved to Austin, Houston, Atlanta, DC, New York. It's the same people who were behind BLM. It's kind of interesting. They take actually good causes, turn them Marxist, and release the hooligans, and the news shows up, and what do? They say, well, if you just give them what they want, they'll stop attacking. And you hear this over and over and over again, both within the U.S. on different political subjects, as well as outside the U.S.
Yeah, you know what? The thing that I'm really interested in is, it's not necessarily the same people on the ground as with BLM or in other cities. It's different people on the ground. It seems like there's more of a criminal element on the ground with these protests, mainly because this is a crackdown on criminality. And I think that these criminals are a little more interspersed with people protesting for the sake of protesting, really. And I think that's what's making this a little more dangerous, John. What do you think?
No, I absolutely agree. And it's interesting because if you listen to the left and their sycophants, both in major media as well as podcasts and everything else, their argument isn't violence is wrong. Their argument is this doesn't look good for our side, so please tone it down or make sure there's not cameras on it. And the interesting thing is now we have, I have a DJI drone in the other room. I think Brian Macbeth actually made a really good point to the police and the National Guard. This isn't just people holding phones. There's drones in the air recording everything that's going on. And this is also how, the DOJ, the FBI, ICE, whoever, is able to figure out who these people are. Because, I'll tell you, I live in DC, and I lived in DC on January 6th. Where I live in the Navy Yard, I can go to my roof and see the Capitol building clear as day. It's less than a quarter mile. So I had kind of a front row seat to January 6th. I want to be clear, I did not go in the building. I was nowhere near the Capitol, but I was able to watch it. You remember the giant manhunt that took, 60% of the FBI to go find all the people who went into the Capitol? Why weren't they arrested in the Capitol? The answer is, during a, quote, insurrection, the mayor didn't issue a shelter-in-place order, which, if it was a real insurrection and the government was about to be overthrown, I think we can all agree would probably have been issued. But she put in a curfew for 6 p.m. I sat on my roof and I watched as the whole thing ended at like 5:45, and everybody walked to bars, they walked to restaurants, or they walked back to their hotel, and then they went home the next day. This is why they had to go all over the U.S. and find these people. This is the 5th day.
Right, but they're all in the same city, and they're not leaving the city, so it's not like they have anywhere to go, right, guys? I mean...
Well, they're not all homeless people. I'm sure they have homes they can go to. It's just they, you know, part of it is they're masked and all these other things, and they just want to cause chaos, in part because they hate Donald Trump. This is their war against Nazi fascism and all of this, and none of them actually understand what Nazism or fascism is. Because it's been so diluted that you now have people who, when they hear Hitler was bad, think the worst that Hitler did is the stuff that Trump does.
Yeah, I agree.
And Trump is nowhere near Hitler.
Well, I mean, they both drink water. They both breathe air. So,
yeah,
so
but Hitler was a vegetarian, so he definitely would have been on the lefty side.
Well, he also didn't have access to McDonald's either. If he would have had access to McDonald's, I think he'd be just like Trump.
No, but there's a whole weird thing about how Fanta was Nazi soda, because Coca-Cola, the syrup got cut off to Germany. So the head of German Coca-Cola came up with orange Fanta. So they had something to sell. And he like put all the profits that Coca-Cola U.S. should have gotten in a bank account. And when the war was over, he like sent them a giant check. And Coca-Cola didn't know what to do. But yeah. Gene, you know I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, right? I've spent a lot of time in Warsaw.
Yeah, no, I got it.
You can't walk around that place without seeing somewhere that they lined people up and the Nazis just machine gunned them. You can still see the bullet holes in the brick. None of that is happening in the United States. And
no. Well, if you ask but you know what? If you ask Democrats, Ross, it's just like what happened in the 1930s and 1940s, right? I mean, it's synonymous. You know, Orange Man is that bad man from WW2.
Well, let me rewind here. You guys said a lot of stuff. Yeah, so you guys said a lot of stuff. Let me just fill in some blanks here. First of all, I disagree with both of you. These are the same people. Okay, they are.
I think they're the same
flags.
People.
They're wearing the Palestinian garb. Same people, right? On January 6th, which, by the way, and by the way, on January 6th, which was by definition a mostly peaceful protest, right? By definition, you can watch it, right? There was a handful of agitators there that were disruptive. What did the government do? By the way, we're doing this now, and this is why the Democrats are scared. What did the government do after January 6th? You kind of touched on some of this stuff. They looked up cell phone data to see who was in the Capitol on that day. They looked up credit card transactions to see who was renting hotels and buying things in Washington, D.C. on that day. And then they hunted them down for years after January 6th. Well, guess what the Trump administration is doing through Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and possibly the DNI and some other people there, the DIA. They're doing that. Okay, so the Democrats are shitting their pants. And by the way, the mayor of LA said, well, it's pretty much contained to like 4 or 5 blocks of madness. Okay, well, January 6th was confined to one building on one day, less than a day, a few hours long, right? Can you people imagine what would happen if not only this year, imagine 2 years ago, that Joe Biden did something we didn't like, which he did a lot of things we didn't like, and then Trump voters in MAGA gear started rioting in major U.S. cities
for days
across the country for days.
Yeah, it would be. if there was a Democrat in office, every branch of the military would have been called up. Every branch of the military and they would have been justifying doing that.
No,
Now,
and Russ, I absolutely agree with you. To be clear, these are the same people. Oh, like, are the people in LA the same people that rioted at Columbia and took over buildings and kidnapped people? No, but were they on campuses in LA? Absolutely, they were. Because look, this is the Marxist intersectional BS, where everything they can do to protest and to it's all about the action, so you can call out the reaction.
Yeah,
that's exactly what
let me ask
do.
this. Another proof for anybody watching us right now that may not believe it's the same group of people. Like, what percentage of the population has no day job and has all this free time to get involved in these random causes and like stay out all night and riot, right? Like, how many people are there like that? It's a small subset of the population. They all happen to be hardcore leftist, anarchist Democrats. And by the way, the Libertarian Party is taken over by the hard left too. So anybody out there who thinks they're a libertarian and they're above the fray, you guys are being led by anarchists too.
Well, hang on a second. Let me clarify what I meant by saying that it's not the same people. I agree it's the same type of people. But in BLM, I didn't see this many Mexican flags. During the protests on campus, I didn't see this many people of color. And in
It's
LA
a
now,
costume change,
more
Gene.
Hispanic.
Gene, in LA, you're right. But also, what was your perspective? In LA, La Raza was absolutely at BLM, and they were flying Mexican flags. Were they doing that in Atlanta? No. Were they doing that in New York City? No.
Were they doing that in Minnesota, where the focus of it was in 2020, or Seattle? You didn't see them there, is what I'm saying.
By the way, just to comment on Maxine Waters' yet again lunacy, let's not forget that in 2021, she gave a speech in Milwaukee, and 2 National Guardsmen were shot in a drive-by in politically motivated violence, and now she's out again railing against the National Guard.
It is very interesting that you brought up Maxine Waters, because she's going to be coming up later on in the week when we talk about Buffoonology 101. Cheap plug for the show coming up Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. But Maxine's certainly going to be discussed there. Did you guys see the clip of Waters trying to get access to the ICE facility in LA? For those of you who haven't, this is comic gold right here.
Wait.
I want you to... Hello. Congresswoman Waters. I just came to use my congressional authority to check on baby.
Ma'am, our lobby is secure right now to all visitors.
Excuse me, I need to get in.
Contact our public affairs.
I need to get in.
Denied.
Hey,
I
will give her credit. She did not assault any law enforcement like the other congresswoman did.
Oh, the bar
has now been indicted.
Oh, you're making the bar so low. First of all, her face is melting, and this poor woman's been in service for, I think she's now been in office for 17 terms, 18 terms, something like that.
And what's her district? Is it LA?
I believe
she was up in
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
But whether it is or not, and we discussed this on the channel before, Ross, yes, members of Congress have statutory access to ICE facilities, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to follow ICE's rules and regulations, especially during emergency situations like, I don't know, a fucking riot.
Gene, they're not serious people. By the way, I heard Maxine Waters was playing center field tonight for the Democrats. Is that true? Can anybody
She covers a lot of ground. She covers a lot of ground.
They're unserious people. She's a clown, right? Most of the people on their side that are very outspoken are clowns. I'm embarrassed for the district that keeps on electing her. And I actually, when I see someone like that get reelected, I know like the instinct for most of us is to say term limits is the solution. I don't believe elections are real if she can keep winning. Like I'm past term limits at this point. There's no way she can win.
No. Here's how she keeps winning. I just looked it up. So she's California 43rd district, which is Inglewood, in this whole area where the riots are happening. So the people rioting are the ones voting for her to do all this shenanigans.
Yeah.
I just honestly hope no National Guardsmen get shot, because they likely don't have ammo. So Ross, one of the questions I actually had for you, I think one of the mistakes was calling up 117 out of Pendleton, not because they're Marines, but because they're infantry. The United States Marine Corps has military police that are trained in civil disturbance, are already briefed in on everything. He could have activated 700 MPs, which I think would have been better, because part of the fear I have is there's some crazy stories from the 92 riots when they called in the Marines. Because when a cop says, cover me, Marines open fire and lay suppressive fire, not train their weapons on windows and doors. So my fear is you're going to have a lot of young kids, like 18, 19, 20, 21. You know what an infantry unit's like, Ross. They're going to do something stupid, and we're going to have another Kent State.
Yeah, so I think that the DOD and certainly the DOD and probably Donald Trump as well have no intention of using the Marine Corps in any operational role whatsoever. One of the reasons why you are not seeing any Marines on television, right? Like one of the first thoughts I had was, why did I see the National Guard get there before the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps is like close and they're active duty? Well, the reason is they're still going through their non-lethal training.
Yes.
Which is what's
delayed. And if they had done MPs, they wouldn't have been delayed. They would have already had the training. And also, they had, MPs aren't just like cops. They also run detention facilities. So they actually, because the whole point of bringing in the Guard is to, one, reinforce security around federal buildings, but also to perform job functions. Like, if the National Guard had never been called out to the ICE detention facility, you would have sworn law enforcement protecting that building. So for every job, every function that we can put National Guard or active duty into within a federal facility, that's one more sworn law enforcement officer who's out on the streets. And also for all the internet people, using the National Guard during a riot to protect a federal building is not a violation of Posse Comitatus.
And that's something we should really emphasize here, is that the National Guard and the Marines that were called, it's not like they're out in these streets going after people. They've been called to defend and to protect federal property. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I mean, there may be some details that are accompanying ICE on executing warrants, but
these are also Marines, so when they're not on duty, they are going to be out in the streets and the clubs, trying to find some women or men to have fun with. So yes, the Marines will be on the streets. It'll be great for the economy of LA. 700 Marines are going to spend a ton of money. So are 4,000 National Guardsmen. You know what? Hey, can you imagine? Because I was listening to Hegseth's testimony earlier today. Most of the $134 million for this deployment is payroll and hotel rooms and per diem.
It's absolutely crazy that's what that is. I do want to discuss Holman went on MSDNC to kind of clear up the misconceptions about what ICE is actually doing. And I don't see this clip getting as much circulation as it should be getting, mainly because it was on MSDNC. So let's take a look at this and let's have a discussion about what ICE's mission actually is in LA.
Are there public safety threats in the Fashion District and at that Home Depot in these raids we've seen?
Yeah, and that's what no one's talking about. The Fashion District wasn't an immigration raid. It was a service of 3 criminal warrants at locations based on a large criminal conspiracy that ICE is investigating. That has to do with money laundering, tax evasion, and customs fraud, where a company underdeclared over $80 million in goods, failed to pay $17 million in fees. And it's part of an overall conspiracy on numerous businesses that they believe that some of this money is being laundered in Mexico and Colombia to fund cartel activity. So this was a criminal investigation that they all responded to in the beginning. That's how it all started. But the facts never got out. Even though we put the facts out, the media didn't cover it. They just said immigration raids, we're separating families and all the negative information we hear all the time. We took a lot of bad people off the street last couple of days. A Vietnamese national that attended a graduation party was kicked out and came back and killed two young people, two young Americans. We arrested a child predator. We arrested someone for sexual misconduct. Someone arrested for convicted of armed robbery. We arrested numerous gang members. What ICE did the last couple of days is make Los Angeles safer by taking public safety threats off the street.
And let's also go into this clip where Caroline Leavitt gave us some of the numbers coming out of the actions by the federal government in Los Angeles.
Updates for you on the numbers, by the way. Since June 6th, there have been 330 illegal aliens that have been arrested as part of these riots in Los Angeles. 113 of those illegal aliens had prior criminal convictions. And overall, and this includes arrests of American citizens, there's been 157 people arrested for assault and obstruction-related charges, including the attempted murder of a police officer with a Molotov cocktail. So who is funding these illegal aliens who are coming in with this very professional riot gear? It's a question everyone in this room who cares about truth should be asking. And we encourage your help in trying to get to the bottom of that question. Indita. Thank you.
So it's not like they're doing nothing and they're just there to agitate. They're getting shit done. By the way, before I let anybody else talk, shout out to all the people on X right now that are watching us, bringing the numbers. If you guys chat on X, we will see the chat coming up in our studio, and we can put you on the screen, and you can hang out and join the conversation with us as well. So that being said, Ross, your thoughts on the actions of ICE by the numbers right now?
So I'm glad that Homan and Leavitt are out there, like, touting the criminal element that ICE is going after. But I gotta be honest, like, most of the polls that I've seen are for mass deportation, the majority of people. They can care less if you're a convicted rapist. Obviously, we don't want those people here either. But you know what? All the other illegals that snuck into our country and are drawing resources away from tax-paying Americans, I'm actually more than okay with deporting their asses too. And anyone who harbors them or impedes ICE, they got to be in trouble. And if they're illegal, they go too. Tom Homan said this from the beginning, by the way, and the Democrats running these blue states, sanctuary states, and cities should have listened to him. He said, if you don't work with us and we have to go into a community to get these people, and we find other illegal aliens hanging out with this guy who don't necessarily have criminal records, they have to go too. We're not going to turn a blind eye to people who are in the country illegally. But if we got to go into a community to get him, and he's hanging out with 3 or 4 of his family members, and they are also illegal, they go too, right? The Democrats brought this upon themselves.
Yeah, John, I'm going to let you speak, but then we got to do the halftime grift. So go ahead.
So I sort of agree with you. Here's the thing. I think focusing on the criminal element, getting warrants, doing due process, and watching the Democrats burn all their credibility is manufacturing consent. So Ross, let's be honest. Do you think 80% of the country currently is in favor of mass deportations? I don't care what they look like. I don't think it's that high.
I don't think it's 80. I think it's 60.
I know, because when you start seeing crying babies on TV, people are going to lose their will. However, by focusing on what they're focusing on and showing the lawfare that the left is doing, which there's something interesting. So there's 677 federal district judges. There's only about 700 immigration judges in this country, and we've got, 20 million people, 10 million on the low side. And was listening to an admin official earlier today who said the goal is 1 million per year. Well, okay, Trump's got 3.5 more years. So 3.5 more million of the 8 million that came in under Biden. One of the problems, one of the major bottlenecks that we have is we don't have enough judges. But there's actually a simple solution for this. So Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act. If he does this, expands it to include cartels, which are a designated terrorist organization, you could actually massively expand what I'm about to say. But he declared Tren de Aragua essentially as combatants from Venezuela under the Alien Enemies Act. So we can actually have every one of those immigration hearings done by a military officer under a military tribunal. You can only do it for entities that fall under the Alien Enemies Act, but this has absolutely been done. I mean, this is part of how they tried people in Gitmo. Now, I'm not saying that we should put people in jail for life, but the minimal due process that is required for a deportation, we've already got military at the border. There's
I get it, but
220,000 officers in the military. You could quadruple the number of immigration judges and not affect readiness.
So I just want to go back to the point that Ross was trying to make before. And Coffee Grinder in the chat says that he found a poll that says it's actually 64% that are in favor. I'm asking him for the source right now in the chat. If you can throw a link in there, that would be great. But I also just very quickly in a Google search, CBS News. Now I left the ground toolbar, the ground news toolbar on top there. I want to point out that CBS News, according to this this ground news, leans left. And a CBS News poll from an organization that leans left is saying that Trump's deportation program nets positive approval amid contrasting views over its scope. Now, this is saying that there's slight approval as you go through the article here. Includes continued strong backing from the Republican base, but also heavily shaped by contrasting views about which people and how many are being targeted. I'm trying to find the actual polling. This article is from 2 days ago. Half of Americans say Trump is deporting more people than they thought he would during the campaign. Surprise, surprise. But here's the poll here. Trump admit programs to deport immigrants illegally in U.S., 54% approval rating in general.
And it's not mass deportations where they start walking into Home Depots and schools and rounding everybody up.
Right. That's just based upon what Trump has been doing thus far.
Right.
So if this is an outlet that leans left, and I dare say it's a little more than leans left, then I would say that there's definitely a lot of support out there for what Trump is doing. That again is probably hidden from a CBS poll, but may show up in another poll. I'm going to get your guys' reaction to that once I get through the grift here. And John, I have to apologize to you. I'm going to put a banner over your face in a little bit here because that's how we do the grift around here. So just, here, hide a little bit. Thanks, guys, for tuning into Behind Enemy Lines. I'm Gene. He's Ross. We got our friend John Lubecki there jumping on the banner to show us his face. Just want to remind everybody that while you're here on the live stream, be sure to like, share, subscribe. All the good stuff that helps us grow via the YouTube algorithm. Like I said, right now we have close to 30 people watching across platforms, which is really, really cool. Glad to pop a big number like that. While you're checking us out, be sure to also check out some merch at shop.buffoonoftheweek.com. And we have new blog posts just about every day or so at buffoonoftheweek.com. That's the wrong banner there. That's the right banner there. So check out buffoonoftheweek.com. And all of our socials are in the description of the video on YouTube and on Rumble. Check us out there. And like I said, all the people on X, come hang out with us in the chat. We get everybody's chat that we can interact with and we can talk to. Thank you, John, for being so patient with the banners right now. There you are. You're back now. So,
Gene, let me jump on that poll real quick.
Yeah, I want to get that, and then, guys, the one thing I want to get into is I actually read through Gavin Newsom's lawsuit, and I want to definitely talk about that and show you how pathetic it is. So, go ahead about the polls, Ross.
Yeah, so in that 46% that don't approve of, it's all the wording of the question, right? Like we don't know what the questions were that led to those results. that the 46% of people that are not approving of Trump's deportation plan thus far would include me, right? Because I don't approve of it. I want mass deportation. So it would look like the numbers are skewed. Remember when the Democrats used to do their poll about how important is like a threat to democracy leading into the 24 election? And it always polled really high, and they assumed that was good for Democrats. When in reality, it was a lot of people, again, like me, that assumed that the Democrats stole the 2020 election. And it was an important issue to me. And that's why guys like me were showing up on the wrong side of that poll. I don't believe that that number is 100% accurate unless I knew what the questions were. But what I'm saying is you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone currently that is not a left-wing lunatic that would advocate to allow people who came to this country illegally to stay. That's just not the majority of people.
Let me give
so this is where, again, I agree with you. You got to look at the question, and it could mean a lot of different things. And this is where polling gets skewed oddly. I think probably only 40% of the country wants mass deportations the way you do, Ross. And if you were reading on that CBS News piece, it said the majority, like most of the people believed that the people being deported were criminals. And so as long as it's that, it's one thing. When you're talking mass deportations and separating families, I mean, not that long ago, you had a mother take her children with her when she was deported, and it was, oh my God, Donald Trump is deporting American citizen children. And then another family made a different choice, and their American citizen children stayed here with family. And the parent went home, and they're like, oh my God, they're separating families. So you can never, ever win. But by focusing on rapists and murderers and people who should go to the front of the line for getting out, you're manufacturing consent amongst, the guy in Iowa who relies on migrant labor, and all these other things to have no issues with what you're thinking needs to be done, Ross.
I got the last point here, Gene, and I'll shut up.
Before you do, I want to provide additional information for you guys to talk about here. So the general number was 54 approve, 46 disapprove. Trump's deportation programs is making people in the U.S. safer, less safe, or no change. 42% say safer, 30% say less safe, 27% say no change. Trump administration is prioritizing deportation of dangerous criminals or those who aren't dangerous criminals. 53% agree that he's targeting dangerous criminals. Trump administration is trying to deport more people than expected, about what you expected, or fewer than expected. 49% say more people than expected. 41% say about what you expected. And for those who are saying that he's deporting more than they expected, 58% disapprove of that. And if you're saying that fewer or the same amount as you expected, it's 66% in favor, 66% approval. So do with those numbers what you will and have at it, Ross.
Yeah, and so, and I get what John is saying. I just want to further solidify this point, and guys like Stephen Miller talk about this a lot, and this is where the crux of the matter really is. The United States Census counts people, not citizens, right? Sanctuary states and sanctuary cities found a loophole to inflate not only their representation in the House of Representatives, but the number of electoral votes that they have in presidential elections. And it's because of all the illegal immigrants in their states that get counted in the census that they have so many members in the House of Representatives and get so many electoral votes in places like New York and California. Mass deportation is the only way to rectify that, or to amend the Constitution and only count citizens for reapportionment purposes.
John, you still there? Just want to make sure I can take you off the screen if you need to.
No. Hold on. I was trying to look something up, actually.
John's trying to light one up on the stream. That's what he's really doing.
No, I didn't know if I like pulled up another tab, it would make me go away, but apparently it does. No, because I was reading earlier yesterday, I think it was, Republicans would have a 27-seat majority in the House if you did not factor illegal immigrants. This is why when they did the census, it went all the way to the Supreme Court on whether the Trump administration could actually ask whether people were illegal or not.
Yeah, and the bigger thing is, and let me tie this into the discussion a little bit. But for those sanctuary laws that were implemented statewide in California, you wouldn't necessarily have this conflict going on right now, because you would have law enforcement cooperating with ICE officials as they come in, and there wouldn't be all this protestation in jurisdictions like Los Angeles and basically throughout California, where there would be resistance to ICE operating as they would normally.
Well, Ronald Reagan killed
because of those sanctuary jurisdictions that ICE has to come in the aggressive manner that they're coming in my opinion.
But Ronald Reagan, by granting amnesty, as well as DACA, because realize DACA was what, 2008? It's now 2025. And so what you end up with, and this is why the Trump administration is going after birthright citizenship, because what you have is in the 80s, at some point under Reagan, he granted amnesty. There was a grand deal where all the illegals in the country would be granted amnesty and become citizens, and they were going to seal off the border and stop illegal immigration. And that's not what happened. So a lot of those people were in California. They had children who are American citizens who now vote. They're 40 now. They have kids who vote. And so this is how a lot of the progressive policies happen, because their loyalty, if you listen to what the protesters themselves say in LA, their loyalty is to Mexico, not to the United States. And that's a major problem.
Well, we see that with all the flags that are out there.
I mean, honestly, Mexico's Russia and LA is Ukraine. Ross, don't have your head explode.
And
Gene,
you know what?
just
I
to
think
go-
we'll leave it.
so
Go ahead. Last word, and then I want to get to the lawsuit.
Last words. You mentioned the sanctuary city policies are what led to all of this. I just want to put a finer point on that. California specifically, but a lot of the left-wing states have the same policy. Not only will they not cooperate with ICE in the sense of turning over illegal immigrants arrested for something else, they will not allow their government, whether it's law enforcement or any other agency in their government, to coordinate or cooperate in any shape or form, which means that the federal buildings in LA were being overrun by insurrectionists. And the LAPD did not respond because they were not allowed to cooperate or coordinate in any way. That's what led to the National Guard and possibly the Marine Corps being sent to LA. The insurrection, due to those sanctuary policies, not the ICE raids. It was that was California's own doing.
But realize the real victims in LA are the Waymo cars who were called to their execution by fire.
Well, let's pour one out for him
during Pride Month, the whole months.
All right. So Gavin
it's
Newsom,
Mexican Pride Month.
So Gavin Newsom, he's suing the Trump administration because he's claiming that calling up the National Guard the way that he did was illegal. And the lawsuit, I've gotten through most of it. And I'm not going to take everybody through everything in it. I just want to point out the really, really stupid parts of it. And there are many stupid parts to it early on. So here's the lawsuit via the New York Times. First of all, let's start with the first page. Filed in the Northern District of California. You know what's not in the Northern District of California?
LA.
Los Angeles. You know what also isn't within the Northern District of California? The state capital of Sacramento.
I thought it was.
Nope, it's not. The reason why they chose this jurisdiction is because you know what city is within the Northern District of California?
The People's Republic of San Francisco?
And who was the mayor of the People's Republic of San Francisco?
Gavin
Newsom.
There you go. That's why he filed it. And you'll see the excuse why they did that is because the Attorney General maintains an office in San Francisco. It's real weak sauce as far as where it was filed. If I was the Trump administration,
They were judge shopping, and the judge didn't get, and they didn't even get their injunction. That's how bad the lawsuit is.
Just imagine how bad it is when you're Gavin Newsom judge shopping in your own state. How bad of the case you think you have?
Although I did hear that the judge escorted Gavin Newsom out through her chambers so that he wouldn't be arrested by Tom Homan.
Oh boy! All right, so just want to briefly get through the introduction here. The governor of the state of California and the state of California bring this action to protect the state against the illegal actions of the President, Secretary of Defense, and the Department of Defense to deploy members of the California National Guard without lawful authority. Now, I want to skip down to paragraph 4 here. The vehicle the president has sought to invoke for his unprecedented usurpation of state authority and resources is a statute, 10 U.S.C. 12406, that has been invoked on its own only once before. By the way, that was during, I believe it was 1957, during segregation to force the state of Arkansas to integrate their schools. So the part of the statute that Gavin Newsom is invoking here is not whether or not the president has the authority to call members of the National Guard into federal service. It's the part that says that those orders shall be issued through the governors of the states. Now, in the law, that's what we call a non-operative clause. The power to call up the National Guard into federal service is not disputed. The president can do that, as you guys probably know. The normal way that you do that is through the governor's office. It is the procedural way to implement what the president has the power to do. But what happens when you have a governor who is unwilling to do what the president wants to do? That is sort of an untested question, but one of the things that I thought of, and I'll throw this to Ross first, is if the governor is choosing to side with those who are breaking the law in his state, isn't that cause to invoke the Insurrection Act?
Yes, of course. And then the other thing, Gene, is just like any other order under the law that has to go through a department head or something else where they use the word shall, you only have one option in that instance, right? If you don't want to push that order down the chain of command, you resign, okay? Or you are disobeying not only the law, a lawful order by the President of the United States calling the National Guard into federal service, right? It says the governor shall issue the order, not may, or gets to think about it, or has a vote. He shall issue the order to his National Guard that they are going into federal service. So he's wrong. And I agree with you. I know a lot of people may not. If he disobeys that, then we have a state in rebellion against the federal government. Again, Democrats, they started the first Civil War, let's not forget. And here we go again.
I think you're both overthinking this. So part of this is written this way simply because of the chain of command. So Donald Trump did not call each individual 4,000 National Guardsmen and said, you're hereby called to federal active duty. No. They sent a message to the governor of California and to the tag of California saying, cough up 4,000 bodies. And those orders went down through the California National Guard chain of command. That's what this is referring to.
Right, but what he did though, John, is Gavin Newsom is alleging that he circumvented his office and went right to the, I believe it's the chief adjutant of the state of California.
Yeah, the adjutant general, which is the two-star in charge of the California National Guard.
Right. So let me give you the exact language of the statute, and I'll show how this is how stupid he is. The president may call into federal service members and units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute those laws. And the three laws that we're talking about here is whenever the United States or any of the Commonwealths or possessions is invaded or is in danger of invasion by a foreign nation, I certainly see a lot of Mexican flags out there. Number 2, there is a rebellion or danger of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, which fits this to a T, or the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States, which is what he was saying. ICE can't execute his immigration policy and follow the law, but not without the help of the National Guard. So I would say you can make a case for any one of those 3 circumstances for this law to be invoked. So when those events trigger it, the president calls up the National Guard. The mechanism by which he's supposed to do that, pursuant to the statute, is through the governors. Now, if the governor doesn't want to do that, then the governor's an insurrection, in my opinion.
Now, okay, so there's something interesting. Under COVID, there was a case, Abbott v. Biden. And quick background, DOD issued a mandate that all National Guard soldiers had to get vaxxed. Abbott said, get vaxxed if you want, don't if you don't. And so DOD tried to court-martial the Texas National Guardsmen who refused to get vaccinated. So Abbott sued, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the result was that when not in federal service, the governor, being commander-in-chief, chooses what can be prosecuted. So, for example, Governor Polis in Colorado, because psychedelics are legal in Colorado, could allow Colorado National Guardsmen to participate in psychedelic-assisted therapy. He hasn't, but under Abbott v. Biden, he could, because the punishment falls under the governor. So an interesting question is, Newsom could set up a huge constitutional crisis where he says they're not properly called into federal service, thereby they're under me, issue orders contrary to Trump. And he's the court-martial authority.
No, but he's not at this point, because once Trump invokes his power to activate those members and units pursuant to the statute, it's what I think.
Unless Newsom says it's an unlawful order.
But it's not an unlawful order, because the president can do so under those 3 circumstances that were described earlier. So do you not dispute that there is a rebellion or danger of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States right now? Or do you not think that the president is unable to, with the regular forces that he has at his disposal, to be able to execute the laws of the United States vis-a-vis immigration laws? I certainly think the president's well within his rights to do all that.
Now, but one of the big questions to ask is, why the National Guard? And I mean, he could add 4,000 federal law enforcement. He could also federalize local law enforcement to conduct ICE operations.
But he doesn't have to.
It's kind of like when he sent the Marines, he sent infantry, not MPs.
And that's all well and good, but that's at the discretion of the president. What you said is at the discretion of the president. It's not that he's required to go through every other alternative before being able to invoke his statutory authority.
One of the things that I need to find, and you may have it, Gene, is there a federal definition of rebellion?
I'm sure that there is, but let's take rebellion out of it for a second, and then, Ross, I'll let you jump in, because I'm dominating a little bit here. But certainly the president can judge whether or not, with the regular forces he has in ICE, whether or not those forces can execute the laws in California at this time. So I think he's got them coming and going both ways here. Ross, I know you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that what John had mentioned about deputizing or federalizing local law enforcement, that would truly have to be at the consent of the local jurisdiction or state. The National Guard, I know COVID was different when the National Guard got activated. They were paid federally, but they remained under Section or Title 32 of federal law. Title 32 means that the federal government's paying you and you're on active duty. However, your governor retains command and
state active
forces.
duty.
These National Guard dudes could have come from any state and got sent to California. They just happen to be California National Guardsmen, and they were not activated under Title 32. They were activated under Title 10, which makes them the same as a regular Army soldier, a United States Marine, sailor, or airman, right? So these are federal troops right now until they go back under Title 32 and back under the control of their governor. So Governor Newsom has no leg to stand on here, and this is the mechanism in the federal law to put down rebellions, protect federal property. I'll leave this topic with this. There's only 3 things that the National Guard or the military is actually supposed to do in any kind of DISCA mission or defense support of civil authorities. They're supposed to save lives, mitigate suffering, and protect property, right? And that's exactly what the National Guard and the Marine Corps has been called up to do, right? They're going to save lives if need be. They're going to mitigate suffering potentially, and they're damn sure going to protect property.
Yeah, and I just want to
I've never known the Marine Corps to mitigate suffering. They thrive on it.
Oh, God. I'm not going there.
And for everybody out there, I served in both the Marines and the Army, so I get to make fun of both.
That's good for you. I certainly can't do that. The point I was going to make going further into the lawsuit, and frankly, it's dry stuff. It's 23 pages long. There is so much loaded language in this lawsuit, like Gavin Newsom invoking the founders' distrust of military rule, as if that's what's going on here, and other conclusory statements about what Donald Trump is doing. But the main point I wanted to drive in discussing this lawsuit is that despite all the loaded facts, despite all the conclusory statements that are in it, Gavin Newsom opened up the door to Trump invoking the Insurrection Act. And I think this might be the biggest self-own in legal history, in political legal history, because
I think the Insurrection Act won't be invoked until Trump loses. So my understanding is the emergency TRO was blocked. There's a hearing tomorrow, which, let's be honest, doesn't matter who wins or loses, because it won't take effect for a couple of weeks, for at least a week or two, to allow the side that loses to appeal up. And this will go to the Supreme Court.
And that's where
honestly, and I actually think that they're going to end up upholding, the president's authority to do this, ultimately. But I don't think until the Supreme Court says, no, you can't use the National Guard for this, Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act based on what's going on currently. Now, it's funny because the Democrats all think this is the 30s and 40s in Germany. And in reality, it's the U.S. 1969 through 71, and we just elected Nixon. So
I also dare say it's the late 50s, and we're talking about integration of school districts and things like that as well.
No, because you didn't have the whole Marxist shit. You had that in the late 60s, early 70s, because the U.S. counterculture, we've since found out since the fall of the Soviet Union, was encouraged and funded by the KGB. And currently, a lot of this stuff is being pushed by the CCP, because what is it doing? It's splitting the whole country apart.
No, I certainly hear that.
So,
by the way, I just want to let everybody know this real quick, because John is correct in saying that the injunctive relief, the temporary restraining order, that was part of what Newsom was looking for, was indeed denied, and there is that hearing coming up. I just want to remind everybody what that means. To get a temporary restraining order in general, you need to prove a couple of things here. You need to prove risk of irreparable harm. You need to prove balance of equities are in your favor. And most importantly, that the likelihood of success on the merits is also a strong possibility in your favor. You have to show that you have the strong probability of winning your case, Ross. And if the TRO wasn't granted, that's a signal from the federal district court that even though he forum shopped, even though he went back to San Francisco, the court could not find a likelihood of success on the merits of his lawsuit.
Yep, and I'm going to push back just real quick on the Insurrection Act. I think Donald Trump will eventually, regardless of what the courts say, have to invoke the Insurrection Act. And the reason why I think this is places like LA and New York, their police departments are functional. And even though they're left wing as hell in those places, if you watch the news, the LAPD is doing something. Once Seattle fully gets engaged here, and they're starting, Antifa's starting to attack federal buildings there. Once places like Seattle, Chicago, Detroit start deteriorating, Donald Trump regrets, and he said this several times, he regrets not invoking the Insurrection Act back in the summer of 2020. He's not going to allow multiple cities to riot, especially when it affects federal buildings. He's just not going to allow it. And I think the Insurrection Act will be invoked regardless of the courts. And the last thing I want to say, Gene, on this topic, and I know we got to get out of here, is a lot of talk about federal troops going into California. So the Marine Corps, again, still really haven't seen them out there. But those National Guardsmen are California National Guard. They literally live, work, and go to school in California, in those very neighborhoods that they've been activated to go perform their duty in, right? He didn't send the Florida National Guard into California. That would have been a little provocative, right? He activated people from the community. So there's no story here really other than liberal hysterics as usual.
And let's not forget, during the 2020 Summer of Love and the BLM riots, because the riots were against the police, the National Guard was actually a calming effect.
And it's a calming effect for the majority of the country, right? In New York City, there are still National Guardsmen patrolling the bridges, tunnels, and subways, right? Because they're not provocative. People like seeing them. It's only the talking heads on the mainstream media that say they're provocative, and Democrats, which is one and the same, obviously.
All right. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, guys, because it's just about time to wrap this puppy up. And, John, the banner is going back on your face because it's final thought time. And now I'm going to take it off so you can give your final thought. John, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, what you've been up to with Lubecki's strategic direction and all the work that you've been doing in Eastern Europe and all that.
So you can find me on Twitter at John, Jon, Lubecki, Lubecky, or at LubeckiSD.com. And there's a little blog, so you can email me there. I tend to work on psychedelic policy while I'm stateside, specifically medical use, versus pretty much what most people are at, which is they want to decriminalize it and all of this. One of the weird things for me was finding out that Luigi Mangione quoted me from a Netflix series. And
so you're to blame.
Apparently. And it's funny because if you read the quote, he didn't actually listen to the quote. Because the quote was, I come from the DARE generation where we had good drugs and bad drugs. Well, good drugs gave us the opiate epidemic, and bad drugs cured my PTSD. So we should look at context of use. Fentanyl is a horrible drug destroying our country. We could do a whole show on how fentanyl and decriminalization is a national security threat. But we can also all agree that in certain circumstances, in a hospital, under direct supervision, fentanyl is a necessary medication. And then in Eastern Europe, been going to Poland and Ukraine. I work on psychedelic policy there. So much easier because they don't have hippies and a counterculture. It's a country that's under attack and sees how much mental health issues there are, and they want to help the people who desperately need it. And because of the patriotism and the love of country that they have over there, it's not about partying and Burning Man like it is in the U.S. You're not going to see, we're going to hold the people who desperately need this hostage unless we get to do it at Burning Man. But I also do medical and humanitarian aid down in Donetsk. One of the things that worries me that I think would absolutely trigger the Insurrection Act that Ross was mentioning, irrespective of any courts. Not that long ago, week or two ago, we saw a major attack from Ukraine inside of Russia. The hard part of that whole thing with drones was getting everything into Russia and into place. The technology is easy. And the U.S. is entirely not prepared for drones. I'm waiting for them to start dropping Molotov cocktails or frozen water bottles or even just Nerf footballs to freak people out from commercially available drones. Once there starts being FPV drone attacks in the U.S., you'll see the Insurrection Act. And I think we will see that at protests or riots or rebellions, however you want to define it.
It's definitely a world that is on the brink in many different ways and in many different places. I certainly hear that. Ross, are you going to bring us down even further here and tell us that the world is gloom and doom and we're all going to hell or what?
No, man. Mine is a quick one. Former vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee, David Hogg, was officially removed today.
Hey!
The Party of Democracy removed their elected vice chairman because he was too white and probably not gay enough. That's my final thought.
Too male, too pale.
The DNC is never short.
Too stale.
Look, the DNC is never short on circular firing squads. I just figured, David Hogg wouldn't be at the center after he's already lived through one mass shooting.
Good Lord. Let's not go there. My final thought is nowhere near as complicated. I want to thank the numbers that came out on X. You guys are awesome. All of our people in the chat that was on YouTube, on Rumble, on X. Thank you guys for showing up. I recently learned that there's a commenter leaderboard on YouTube. And you guys, in the future, I'm going to bring that up so we can duel a little bit back and forth on that. That's really freaking cool. And I guess for my final thought, I was going to talk about sort of the lighter side of what we're seeing right now in this issue in LA. And I guess I'll bring up this clip real quick from our friend Maxine Waters that we showed before.
And it's not the Waymos.
And her advice is stop believing what you're seeing and start listening to what she's saying.
Even those who were out of step with what we are advocating, peaceful protest, did not create any violence. Nobody was shot. Nobody was killed. Get it in your head. And so when martial law is called, what are you going to say? I missed the point. Don't miss the point, you all.
Don't miss the point, y'all. My God.
By the way, she said the same thing in Milwaukee in 2021, and within hours you had National Guardsmen shot. And I believe there has been a fatality in LA. Now, I don't know if it was like a protester had a heart attack or stroked out or something, but apparently there was a fatality.
What the fuck is this? What the fuck is this, pal? There's no competition on this show. Come on. All right, listen.
You guys will see.
Nobody's stopping you, Ross.
Hey, well, I mean, you can upload clips.
Gene controls the board.
Yes, but you control me.
Like you didn't know he was going to ask you for final thought?
No, he won't allow me to
literally
put the clips I want to put on.
Literally,
listen, I'm also censored in the group chat. If I try to put stuff on YouTube, I always get censored or banned.
It's not just you. It's everybody else that has a potty mouth. And I don't do it. YouTube does it. Whatever. You know what? Fuck this. It's time to shut this shit down. I want to thank John for hanging out with us. John, you can also hang out when we go off air. I'm just going to play us out a little bit here. Ross, you ready to shut this fucker down or what?
Let's get out of here.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Gene and Ross behind enemy lines. We are out of here. Now play our motherfucking anthem. Good night, folks.
We're not allowed, not without electoral.
Go fuck yourself. Is that clear?
Don't let them have sway. my chance. If I ever stare with a smirk and a gaze, holding down the fort in this Democrat cage. Whispers in the dark, strategies unfold, allies unseen, but bonds remain bold. Commitment to the cause in the heart of the storms. In the name of freedom, we're breaking the norm. Cause let's take blues behind enemy lines. Fighting for the truth, feels like wartime. Hold back down, keep it rugged and raw. Cool in the chaos, but loud in this war. We're loud in this war. Let's take blues behind enemy lines. Fighting for the truth, feels like wartime. Don't back down, keep it rugged and raw. Cool in the chaos, but loud in the war. We're loud in the war. We're loud in this Headed to the dark, strategies unfold. Allies unseen, but bonds remain bold. Commitment to the cause in the heart of the storms. In the name of freedom, we're breaking